Hello, my name is Alexandria Spurgeon, and today we're going to be talking about constructivism. Okay, constructivism, what is it? Well, constructivism is basically a meaning-making theory. It reflects that students, adults, children that are below student level, they create their own meaning based on experiences. They construct their own learning. This is really reflected through children, adults, and even younger children creating their own learning that might be misconceptions just based off their experiences, things that they have learned by themselves. Okay, who was the first foundational theorist to come up with the idea of constructivism? Well, the first theorist to actually put it all together in a way that reflects true constructivism is Jean Piaget. There was people before him in the classic antiquity that reflected Socrates and his followers. They really thought about learning as a constructivist learning theory, but Jean Piaget was the first person who actually put it together that people learn through assimilating knowledge into logical structures. The next person who added on to that was John Dewey. He figured out that learning is made through experiences. He really emphasized experiences when he talked about constructivist learning or just learning in general. And then Lev Vygotsky, he added to the constructivist theory as well, saying that learning is social. Students learn best from each other. Also, he added the zone of proximal development and scaffolding, where there's a level where students can learn, not basically on their own, but with the help of others. And this is practically the best, area for constructivist learning to occur. And there's a lot of others too that reflected this type of constructivist theory, especially modern day thinkers. This is really gaining a lot of speed and momentum in the last century. Okay, now let's talk about how constructivism is different. Okay, so let's talk about how the constructivist model differs from the regular classroom model. Well, first let's talk about curriculum, and then we're going to talk about student work, and then we're going to talk about students' roles, and then the teachers' roles, and then the role of assessment in the classroom. Well, starting with curriculum, we'll say that in the regular classroom, you might have noticed, and I know I noticed, that learning starts out with small details being added up, going from least to most difficult until you get the whole picture. While constructivist learning starts with a whole picture and then zooms in. This zooming in is led by the student. The student is inquiring, so this means that learning is inquiry based. Now let's talk about how the students are viewed differently. So in the regular classroom, students are vessels that are being filled up, while in the constructivist classroom, students are captain of their own learning ship. They're in charge of their learning, and they're actively participating in their own learning. They're making meaning as they go along. They're also reflecting on the learning they've learned. They're seeing, do they have any misconceptions? Do they understand the material fully? It really puts students in a place where they're responsible for their learning, which empowers them and also gives them a deeper connection and a deeper reason to focus and to thirst for learning. Next, we're going to talk about how students work differently. Work is all about answering questions and formulating questions to be answered. So teachers will formulate questions and the students will formulate questions, and they will search together for those answers. And this is how deep constructive learning is achieved. Also, different intelligence are utilized in this method. The teacher will teach the different students' learning style as well as assess different students' learning style when they work. Also, learning is very collaborative. Students will work together in groups, group discussions, group projects. All this is very big in the constructivist learning model. Next, let's talk about the teacher's role. How is the teacher's role different? Well, the teachers are no longer just, sage on the stage. They're more guides on the sides. They facilitate learning instead of dictating the learning. They create authentic work instead of, multiple choice tests. They also teach by asking questions, not by answering questions. This is what I really like. The teachers present a question and the students find the answer. This finding the answer of the question is where the learning occurs, and this learning is not passive but active. Next, let's talk about how assessment is different. Assessment in the constructivist class is not going to be multiple choice test with one answer, and it's not just going to be test. It's going to be equally the process is going to be equal to the product. So the learning done throughout the unit is going to be as equal to the unit test. Teachers will assess work as well as students' point of view, and they will assess using observations of the student. Okay, so how do we practically apply constructivism to our classroom? Well, a great way to do this is by using the PAR model. And the PAR model relates to constructivism because it represents true active learning. Okay, so what is the PAR model? The PAR model represents 3 steps: present, apply, and review. Now, these 3 steps should not be focused on equally. Actually, presenting should be 35% of the instruction process, while applying should be the largest amount because you want the students to be actively applying what they've learned. That's the best way to conceptualize learning, and that's going to be 60% of the PAR model. Next is going to be reviewing your learning. That's the smallest part, and it's going to be 5%. Remember that assessment in the constructivist model, the product is just as important as the process. So the reviewing time does not have to be that long because you've been assessing throughout the entire unit. Okay, so let's talk about the very first section of the PAR model, presenting. Presenting should be in a way that the content makes students think. This means you can apply a lot of different great strategies to present your information that makes students think. One great way is by asking. Just learning by questioning is a great way to kind of put this. Basically, the students are asked a question and they learn through finding the answers. A great variation on this is the snowball learning strategy, where students will start individually answering a question and then get into a small group and kind of form that into one answer that the small group finds together, and then a larger group that has one answer to the question, and then an even larger group that has one answer to the question, and then these groups will present it to the teacher. And that's a great way to get learning where a lot of students' opinions and ideas are represented. Okay, next let's talk about class brainstorming. This is kind of self-explanatory. The class brainstorms together on an idea or a concept. And then there's thought experiment. I really like this one. This is where you kind of present a thought that really goes deeper than just a question. Like, it represents learning through kind of empathy and different perspectives. A question example could be like, how would you feel if you were part of the American Revolution? That's a deep level question that students would have to learn a lot to be able to express their thoughts and feelings. Another great example is round, and this is where the students go around in a group answering a question one by one, so everyone's thoughts are represented. Next, let's talk about the apply portion of the PAR model. You apply to conceptualize learning. Basically, applying is the biggest part because this is where you achieve deep learning. And a good rule of thumb is that if you're teaching a practical skill, you should be applying your knowledge by doing a practical task. If you're teaching a cognitive skill, you should apply your knowledge by using meaningful discussion. Next, let's talk about reviewing what you've learned. This can be through summarizing or clarifying. Reviewing can happen as a refresher before content or as an assessment after content. It can be represented by tests, handouts, projects, posters, and it's really good to review in groups and then present that to the teacher, and the teacher can kind of assess what you've reviewed. Okay, so we've gave a brief overview of the constructivist model, and we've showed you how you can practically apply that in your classroom using the PAR model. But let's talk about a scenario where you can kind of see the constructivist and PAR model in action. The scenario I came up with was teaching students about the 4 sentence types. This is going to be done using the PAR model. Okay, first we're going to present the information about the 4 sentence types, and we're going to do this through jigsaw learning. The students are going to be set up in centers. Each student is in a group of 4, so each student gets a sentence type, and the centers are going to be a book which explains the sentence types, a handout which explains the sentence types in a kind of more shortened way, and a YouTube video that explains the sentence type. The student can pick the YouTube video that they that relates to their sentence type, and also a teacher meeting where the teacher will just kind of give them a mini lesson on sentence types and ask them a question, make sure they're really on the right track. Next, the students are going to be applying what they've learned, so the apply section of the PAR model, and they're going to be doing this through creating an anchor chart. The students are going to have to put an example of each type of sentence on the anchor chart, as well as the definition of each type of sentence on the anchor chart, and 2 illustrations on the anchor chart. And each group is going to do this, so each group will kind of learn through doing and learning through teaching, which I think is a really good method. Students really learn from other students as well as learn by teaching other students. Next, we're going to go to the review section of the PAR model. The students are going to review what they have learned through presenting their anchor charts to the class and to the teacher. And the teacher is going to informally assess these anchor charts to kind of make sure each student has got this concept. And after that, the students are going to complete an exit slip where the teacher just lists 4 different types of sentences on the board, and the students, they write on their exit slip what type of sentence each sentence is. So that's the end of my presentation on the constructivist model and the PAR model in a practical scenario, how you can use it on your classroom. I really hope you try this out in your future classroom, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you for watching.